Good evening and welcome to the Silicon Valley Entrepreneur, a series of conversations with startup founders and their investors on what it takes to build a viable, fundable company. I'm Chris Gill, President and CEO of S-Phase, the Silicon Valley Association of Startup Entrepreneurs, the largest and fastest growing not-for-profit for entrepreneurs in Silicon Valley. This week I'll be interviewing serial entrepreneur Judy Estrin about her new book, Closing the Innovation Gap. So Judy, good to see you. Thank you for coming along. Welcome to the Silicon Valley Entrepreneur. Before we talk about the book, can you tell us a little bit about your background, please?
Sure, and I'm going to go, the one-liner is I'm a serial entrepreneur, but I'm going to go back a little further because I think it's interesting to kind of see the influences on my background, which is that I actually grew up in a technological or a computer science household at a time when a lot of people didn't. My father worked with Von Neumann, who was the architect of the initial, one of the first computers for those people who still remember that at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton. But when I grew up, he was at UCLA, started the computer science department. My mother also was a PhD in electrical engineering, which there were not many of women PhDs in those days. And she was actually a biomedical engineer. So I grew up in a household with computers, with science. And then I did my undergrad at UCLA in math computer science and my master's at Stanford in EE computer engineering. And when I was at Stanford, I worked, my advisor was Vint Cerf, who is commonly known as the father of the internet. Turns out he was my father's PhD student when he was at UCLA. So when I was at Stanford, I was part of the group that did the initial development of the TCP protocols, which really is the backbone of the internet. And so I was involved very early on in the internet research that went on. I left Stanford. I had jobs, I had offers from HP and Intel and Xerox and all of these large companies. Had no idea that I would ever be interested in being an entrepreneur. I was just looking for a job. And one of my father's friends told me that the smartest people he knew were at this teeny little company called Zilog that had 50 people. And Zilog was a spin-off of Intel. And I decided to go where the smartest people were. So my first job was at a startup, which gave me exposure to just how exciting it was to be part of a small company. So as opposed to taking a career path where I might have worked for 10 years before I became a manager in the more traditional way, I started off my career in an entrepreneurial venture, not even knowing what an entrepreneur really was, and very quickly moved into engineering management. And then actually after about 4 years at Zilog, co-founded my first company in 1981 called Bridge Communications. And between 1981 and 98, founded 3 companies, mostly in the networking infrastructure. Bridge Communications was shipped the first commercial router and was really in the local and wide area networking business, network computing devices, which developed X terminals, thin clients before thin clients were popular. And then the third company was Precept, which in 1995 we had video streaming software very much ahead of its time. Now Precept was acquired by Cisco, and I became Cisco's CTO for 2 years. That was my first experience with a large company, and it was in 98. So at the peak of the bubble between 98 and 2000, I was Cisco's CTO. Left in 2000, wanted to go back to running my own company and started a company called Packet Design. The whole idea behind Packet Design was to be a continual serial entrepreneur. So we had multiple projects, and then we would spin out companies and let the idea was for the companies to then get their own venture financing and grow while we could stay and start on the next project. It was almost to be able to just focus on the first part of the entrepreneurial venture. We did spin out 3 companies, but unfortunately Packet Design got hit with the bursting of the bubble, the fact that the networking market was not growing in the way that it once had. And so we ended up changing the business model. One of the companies we spun out is still a successful concern. It's still private. It's called Packet Design Inc. and the other two companies ended up getting shut down before they took off, in essence. So gave me a lesson in failure as well as success. And so since changing the business model of Packet Design, I'm not running a single company.
Mm-hmm.
In parallel with being an entrepreneur, the other very exciting part of my life has been as a board member. I've been on the board of Federal Express for almost 20 years, and I've been on the board of the Walt Disney Company for a little over 10 years. At one point, I was also on the board of Sun Microsystems and Rockwell. So I've been exposed to the academic world through my family, through my education, to entrepreneurship through my career, and to large corporations through sitting on the board of two of what I think are the most innovative companies in the world. And so it's been interesting to be able to see innovation and technology through the eyes of all three of those. A couple of years ago, I embarked on something I'd never done before, and that was writing a book. And so I'm doing a little bit of everything at this point.
Okay, and that's a great segue from an explanation of your background, and that was very useful to have the understanding of the impetus you've got. What was the inspiration for the book?
Well, the inspiration for the book was, and let me go back a minute, which is that every company that we started, the inspiration was never, oh, we want to start a company, let's go look for an idea. Each company was inspired by identifying a problem and being passionate about that problem and solving that problem. And each company was targeted at solving something that hadn't been solved before. Well, it's interesting that writing the book came about the same way. I've never been a writer. I had never written anything before embarking on this. And like an entrepreneur, you start a company. If you knew what you were getting into, you might not do it.
Yeah,
well,
sure.
If I knew what I was getting into, I didn't realize the process of writing a book, but I'm very glad that I did. But what inspired me was concern. And it was at a time when my son was just entering high school. And when I talked about my background, I actually missed probably the most important thing I've done in my life, which is being a mother. And that's like being an entrepreneur also in terms of raising a child. But my son was entering high school, and I was really beginning to think about him and his career as he was thinking about what he might want to do, where might he want to go to college. And was increasingly concerned that the world he was going to graduate into was going to be a very different world in terms of opportunity than the one I had. And I was so lucky to build a career at a time when innovation and support for entrepreneurship was just thriving in this country. But I don't think it is today. And so I started thinking about that and thinking about what had changed, why had it changed, and what we could do about it. And for a year or two, I was giving presentations in various places, and people often said, have you thought about writing about this? And I kept saying, no, no, no. And then one day I was open enough to say, well, maybe I should. And I embarked on trying something new and wrote a book about it.
Okay. So the title is Closing the Innovation Gap. How do you define innovation? Because I've looked this up and I've seen various definitions of it. What's your definition of it?
So one of the purposes of the book is actually to get across the message that innovation means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and that it's not just a soundbite. The fact of the matter is that the word innovation has become overused, and people take it for granted. Some people think innovation is a new product or a new idea or a new way of doing things. So what does innovation mean? It means doing something new in a new way. It may be products, it may be services, it may be new business models, it may be changing the way you think about something, it may be new research, it may need new ideas. And the point that the main point in the book in trying to explain what's behind innovation is to understand that it's not simple, and that there is actually what I call in the book an innovation ecosystem, which it consists of research, and research is about furthering understanding, discovery, ideas. It's not about products. Research is not about solving a particular problem. It's about furthering understanding of a subject. Research is also about training new minds, because a lot of people do research while they're at school and then move out into the workplace. Then there's development, and you can innovate in development, which is new products, new product concepts, advanced technology, essentially taking ideas and bringing them to market. And that's the most traditional form of innovation. But then there's also innovating in the application of science and technology. So if you think about healthcare, that is innovating in the application of new medicines or new medical procedures, or innovating in education, or innovating in government. It's all about how can you apply new technology, new ways of thinking. And if you, an interesting example of that, if you look at a company like Google, they started out with a very interesting algorithm in the research community. They then went and started a company in the development community, which was developing a search engine. But what has really made Google successful is actually their innovation in the application community, because they have innovated in how they tie advertising to search, and they have a very innovative IT infrastructure, and how they have built that infrastructure to be able to scale profitably and handle as much traffic and as much search. So that's an example of how you really need, most people think about innovative as just a product, but it really is this circle of these communities that interact with each other. And when I call it an ecosystem, a biological ecosystem is communities that are influenced by environmental factors like rain or sunshine. Well, the environmental factors for innovation are leadership, policy, funding, culture, and education. And it is those levers that, depending on whether you're doing them right or not, allow innovation to thrive or stifle innovation.
Okay. You've actually expanded into some of the questions I had lined up, but that's fine, because we'll dig a little deeper into this. Why is innovation so important?
So innovation is important to organizations, it's important to the country, and it's important to individuals, because another way of thinking about innovation is change, right? Continuous change. It's something new. And the organizations need to be innovative to succeed, to thrive, to grow. Because if you don't continually come out with new products and new services and have new markets to enter, you ultimately will stagnate and you will not grow. Countries need organizations to be innovative to drive the economy. It is innovation that drives economic growth. And if you look at any significant economic cycle we've had, at its heart has been innovations like the PC, like the internet, the discovery of DNA, kicking off biotech, the cell phone, the transistor. You know, you can go through any number of these breakthrough innovations that have ultimately then resulted in economic growth. Innovation also impacts the quality of our life, whether it is new medicines that allow us to cure diseases or live longer, or the materials in our clothes that come from material science that make our clothing more comfortable, or we can travel without it wrinkling, or the products we use to clean our home. So innovation not only drives the economy, it drives the quality of our lives. But in addition to that, we are now faced with a set of major challenges as a planet, globally, whether it is energy dependence and becoming energy independent with clean, renewable energy sources, reversing climate change, affordable and available high-quality health care, our security, education, all of these major problems that we face. The only way that we are going to address them is through innovation, because It is going to take innovation in science and technology to understand the problems, to solve the problems, whether it's new alternative forms of energy or better understanding our impact on the environment. But it also is going to take a new way of looking at these problems in order to solve them. So it's going to take new products, new services, and new ways of thinking in order to address the major problems that we face as a country and as a civilization. And last, innovation is important to each one of us personally. As we go through life, we change. So whether you want to change careers, decide to become an entrepreneur, working at a large company, become a parent, any of those changes in life, you can maximize the benefit of if you yourself are innovative, if you yourself have a capacity for change and look at things differently, are willing to question the status quo, are willing to take intelligent risks, if you're willing to try something even though it might fail. I started out writing the book. I had no idea that I would be able to write a book, but if I hadn't been willing to risk failure, then I never would have started out and tried. So as individuals, innovation is important. It's important to understand what makes each one of us innovative, because it's nested. It takes innovative people to make an innovative organization. It takes innovative organizations to make a country that has the innovation it needs to drive the economy.
Okay, digging into that a little bit, and it's something that I came across recently. The guys at Y Combinator used to be in Boston, so on the East Coast, and in Silicon Valley. And they've decided to shut down their East Coast operation because their view was a lot of people have got ideas out there, but they're not able to take it any further. They're not, they don't have the entrepreneurial spirit to take the next step. Whereas Silicon Valley has the entrepreneurial spirit. Your next door neighbor almost certainly has done 2 startups here, you know, that sort of thing. What's your view of that? Is it, you know, the idea or the implementation? What's your take on that? Okay.
So the fact of the matter is you need to have both. And one of the things that has been so special in this country is that we have had the commitment to research where a lot of the ideas come from, yet we've been incredible at being able to translate those ideas into products and services through entrepreneurialism or also through large companies. But it really, the U.S. is really somewhat unique in being able to traverse that ecosystem that I talked about. One of the things that I came up with when I was trying to think about how can you explain to somebody what makes someone innovative? How do you explain how to make an innovative culture? And this has a lot of overlap with entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship and innovation are linked, but they're not exactly the same thing. You can be an entrepreneur without being innovative, and you can be innovative at a large organization without being an entrepreneur. But they have a lot of things in common. And what occurred to me as I was interviewing people, thinking about all of my experiences, is that there really are 5, what I call 5 core values that are consistent across organizations, people, and cultures that make innovation thrive. So the first one is questioning. You need to be curious. Questions and curiosity drives innovation. It's what makes you say, hey, why isn't this problem solved by somebody else? What could I do? What might be interesting to do? But it's not just questioning. It's also the ability to self-assess, because the best innovators and the best entrepreneurs are able to not just ask the question up front, but are able to continually or periodically, because you don't want to continually doing it, but periodically stop and say, am I going in the right direction? Do I need to turn right a little bit, adapt, adjust? One of the hallmarks of innovators and entrepreneurs is that flexibility to be able to self-assess, take a realistic look at where you are, question yourself, and figure out how to adapt to those changes. The other thing about questioning is you want to not be judgmental. If you're judgmental in your questions, you shut down innovation. If you're inquisitive, you tend to open people's minds. So the first one is questioning. The second one is risk, which is a willingness to fail. And that is the hallmark of Silicon Valley, or has been the hallmark of Silicon Valley. One of my concerns is I don't think it is quite as strong as it used to be. And the notion that you are willing to try something, even if you're going to fail, and if you failed, that is not a mark on your career, and that you can pick yourself up, start again, and learn from that failure. And I actually think that the Valley has become more risk averse than it used to be. It still is better than any place else in the world, but there is less risk taking. People are tending to invest in incremental innovation and not taking the big risks. So risk and failure is critical. The third one is openness, to imagine, to collaborate, to share information. The fourth is patience, but that's active patience. So, because entrepreneurs are not exactly patient, but in an innovator, it means tenacity in some ways. It means the patience to keep going, to not discard a problem just because you can't solve it initially. But in investors of early stage startups or research, they have to be patient. So you need patient capital for entrepreneurship and for innovation to work. And last is trust. You have to trust in yourself, and you have to be in a trusting environment. You need a certain level of a safety net if you're going to make yourself vulnerable. And you need all of those in balance. And to give you a counterexample, if you have risk without questioning, that is gambling. That is not entrepreneurship or innovation. If you have risk without questioning, and you don't have the openness or the transparency to understand what it is you're taking risks on, and you're not patient, you want instant gratification, that's our financial crisis. And the lack of those core values that then led to a breakdown in trust, and banks wouldn't trade with each other, is actually how we ended up in the financial crisis that we're in.
Okay.
So it just shows you how important those 5 values are.
Okay. Well, what do you think are the biggest obstacles to reviving innovation in the USA?
I think that we took one step with the change in administration, because I do believe that the current administration understands the need for innovation, and we need to recommit to investment in research. We need to recommit to the right type of investment in education, and we need to be educating innovators and entrepreneurs, and not just people who can check off the bubbles on a test sheet. So we need the right steps in terms of education. But one of the most significant things we need is to get our entrepreneurial ecosystem back working again. And that involves 2 things. One is that I've been saying for the last couple of years, is that people are becoming more risk averse. And as people become more risk averse and unwilling to invest in very, very early stage startups, or as large companies are unwilling to invest in very early stage ideas because Wall Street is putting so much pressure on them for quarter to quarter earnings. So you have large companies and startups and venture capitalists being more risk averse. We need people to understand that the unintended consequences of that is that we really stifle very, very important innovation that 5 years from now, we're not going to have the growth that we need. And we have an innovation deficit. There's lots of innovation going on, but it's really built on the seeds we planted 10, 20, 30 years ago. We're not planting enough seeds for the future. Mark Andreessen, when I was interviewing him, gave me a great quote. He's the developer of the browser. And I asked him how he did it so quickly. And he said, Judy, what I did was the icing on a cake that had been baking for 30 years. Well, we're doing a lot of icing now, but we're not building the layers of the cake. We're not baking enough cake, planting enough seeds for the future. So we need to address that problem. And then finally, one of the side effects of the financial breakdown and the financial crisis is there's no IPO market. And in the end, if you don't have liquidity out there or the hope of liquidity, VCs are not going to invest, because that is what the business model is. You invest, you take risks, and you have liquidity. So you have mergers and acquisitions. But without an IPO market to play off the M&A, your valuations are significantly depressed. So the whole venture entrepreneurial ecosystem needs a reset, and we need to be taking more risks, we need to be planting more seeds, and for the sake of the whole country, we need to get out of this kind of locked up financial system that we have today.
Okay, we've only got a couple of minutes left. What do you see as the call to action to get things moving in the right direction now?
So I think the call to action, again, I don't have simple answers to these, because there isn't just one call to action.
Right.
There is call to action in government, which is the government can inspire, the government can increase research funding, the government can look at its policies to make sure that it is encouraging innovation and not discouraging innovation, whether it's anything from cap gains tax to R&D tax investment, patent reform. So there's a lot of different policies, and the government can make sure we're doing the right thing in education. But it's up to the business community to really take a look at themselves in the mirror, whether it's VCs or large corporations, and saying, are we investing enough in the future? Have we become too complacent? Are we simply falling back on incremental, small baby steps? Or are we taking the risks, having the balance between incremental and more breakthrough disruptive innovation, and invest so that 5, 10, 20 years from now, our kids will have the same type of environment that we've benefited from.
Okay. There's more questions I could ask you. I mean, there really are. There's a ton of stuff here. This is a terrific book that you've got. Unfortunately, it's time to wrap up the show. So I'd like to thank you very much for coming along, Judy. Do appreciate it. This was very enthusiastic, very articulate definition of the program and of your book. Very interesting.
Thank you for
going to have to ask you back again to get some more information on it. Do appreciate it. So thank you for sharing. And it's thanks and good night from the Silicon Valley Entrepreneur. Thank you, Judy.